Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beat Around the Blockchain. Thank you for tuning in. We've had a lot of good feedback over the last few weeks and excited to keep it going. On this episode, we've got my friend. I've met him through the VFriends community, very active on Twitter. On Twitter, he goes as Tiger or Tiger, depending on how you interpret it. But I know him as Tom Gervasio. Tom, how are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This is exciting.
Of course. And your background is hands down one of the best backgrounds that I've seen. I aspire to have a similar amount of memorabilia behind me. I'm just one of those like non-handy people that like I'm terrified to put a nail in the wall, which tells
Yeah,
you that like I didn't grow up with a dad around the house. So in my head, I'm like, I just wait for my handy friends to come around and then ask them to do this stuff.
this is all YouTube. YouTube educated here.
Well, one of the things that we were talking about off camera, I want to point out, is some of those shelves in the background are actually some of Gary Vee's books. What had you come up with the idea of using books as shelves? Out of curiosity, just too many
You know,
didn't know where to put them, or
yeah. I bought a bunch. I think I bought 190 something, whatever the equivalent of what 12 would be. So I had so many extra. I actually gave a ton away at a garage sale. I figured that was kind of like appropriate. But I still have 30 to 50 left, and I was redoing the room, my office here, and I just kind of had the idea. I knew that they sell these shelves that you can use a book so that it looks like a floating shelf, and it's really simple. And I was just like, that's great, because it was right at the Macy's drop when I got the figurines in, and I was like, how do I display these? And I don't know, it just kind of came to me. It bought them on Amazon, and it was really simple. You can put a nail in the wall. It can always be fixed.
love it. Well, let's dive right into it, Tom. You've got a really interesting story from 5 years ago. You were kind of at a pivotal point in your life, making big changes with a lot of other things going on personally as well. So I want to take a step back in time to, we'll call it 6 years ago. What were you doing? You were in a white collar role, and you were about to go through a big transition in your life. So tell me a little bit about that time, where you were in your life, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Sure. 6 years ago, I was a sales manager, an inside sales manager at a payroll company. It's a national payroll company located in Pennsylvania. I'm actually from New York, but I had moved here to launch this inside sales department a few years prior to 6 years ago. So we had been building that team up, and it was going really well. But we were getting to a point where we were the smallest sales team in the country because we were so new, even though we covered about 70% of the country because we didn't have offices in every state. So, the team was doing really well because we had such large territories. So it kept growing and growing, and I kept getting some more budget to hire more people. And we got to a point where we were one of the highest sales team in the country. So when that started happening, the company heads were like, let's assign an executive to oversee this team, and maybe we can put gasoline on the fire. So they did that, and that's where the pivot kind of started happening. It kind of got complicated. There was some disagreements with the direction of the team. I mean, I liked the growth aspect, but I just feel like some of the decisions that they were making and where they wanted to go is not something I was very excited about. There was a lot of blaming involved and finger pointing. So I just didn't want to, it became a work environment that went from fun and flexible to very micromanaged. So I just, at that point I'd been in sales and sales management for about 10 years at very different industries. I felt comfortable with sales, especially inside sales. And, I think that, business can be done over the phone. So I felt like I could sell anything that I had conviction in. So I really always wanted to be my own owner because I like flexibility. I like freedom. I just was always scared to do it. There's always a reason not to. Whether it's I don't have enough money or I have too much responsibility. And, it was I was in both situations, but I just knew that, I looked around that company and other companies, and saw sales managers that were like in their 50s, 60s. And, you know, they're great guys, they're great gals, they're great people. Just, I didn't want to get to that point where I was still, it's so hard to climb the corporate ladder sometimes that I just didn't want to find myself in a lateral position 30 years from now. So I just started looking up businesses. I was looking for an existing business to buy because I needed some instant cash flow. I am married. I was married at the time, and we were pregnant. Well, she was pregnant. And, you know, I just was getting like, if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So I would say about 9 months before I actually made the transition, I just started looking on websites, bizbuysell.com, just looking for an existing business that interested me. I had a checklist of things that it needed to be for me to actually take this big leap. One thing
really
at the
quick,
top of the list was
really quick. I want to pause here really quick because we're about to start getting into some good stuff, and you've said a couple of things that I want to make sure to hit on. When you were talking about always knowing that you wanted to do your own thing, you have that feeling of, oh, I can, you know, sell whatever I want. I can sell anything. That's just after 10 years, as a salesperson myself, you tend to feel that way. That's pretty natural. And I would say I would know more than 50% of the people that I've met in my industry and doing sales that would agree with that statement of like, eventually I want to have my own thing. However, very few of those 50% of people actually go and take that plunge or are really built for it because it's more than just selling. So before we dive into exactly what you went into next, what was it about you and some of that self-discovery phase as you're going through this thought process in your head, whether it was at that time or leading up to that time, that made you feel confident in yourself that you actually were built to go and operate your own business?
You know, as much as that last job, I say that it, you know, things happened and I wasn't happy there. It really, I wouldn't change a thing because I had some sales management experience at the company before that in New York City, but that one is where I took something that even the CEO or owner of the company didn't really believe in. He believed sales had to be done in person, handshake, very old-fashioned type of mentality. And I had only been in inside sales. So I knew it could be done. And so when I went there, there was nothing. I mean, there was 2 lead generation people and that's it. We weren't even allowed to do full sales at the time. So it was like farming, cold calling, get leads and pass it off to the closest office. And within 2 years, it became one of the largest sales revenue generating teams. So it was really that job that made me feel like, and I don't like payroll doesn't interest me at all. I worked there for a long time and I still don't know because I couldn't I wasn't interested in it. I
sold
liked
payroll
the people.
too, so I get it.
Yeah. So, it's necessary. I have a payroll team, but it's just not interesting to me. So, if I felt like if I could take really nothing and build it to something that was doing so well in an industry that I didn't care about, what I could do it especially in an industry that I do. So, just an area that piqued my interest. I had conviction in that I really, and a necessary service. I mean, we'll get into what I do and why I feel like it's really, I don't really have to sell anything, but that gave me the confidence. So that last job, even though so many things went wrong, especially towards the end for me, it was that job. But I always kind of felt that way, but I only felt it in 2 industries at that point. And both of them, again, were like luxury items where this was like a necessity item, this payroll. And then especially what I do now that I was like, if I have an interest and conviction in the thing that I'm selling, I can do it. And then managing a team of 2 to 30 really made me confident that I could run a team as well.
Mm-hmm. Something that I noticed that you mentioned, and I've gone through this transition recently too, is for me anyways, and a lot of people that I've spoken to have similar thoughts on this, when I'm doing things that I genuinely am excited about and want to do, I'm willing to give a lot more sustained attention to it, a lot more effort. I'm willing to do things even when they're not sexy and, oh, like I would love to go and do this manual task or admin tasks, right? Versus like I love being customer facing, but I actually have to do these back end things in order to make those effective, right? But I'm willing to do those when I'm actually excited about the thing that I'm selling or operating or whatever it is, right? And even when it comes to not just, we'll call it 9 to 5, your normal day-to-day job, but external things as well. Like when I was trying to figure out we'll call them side hustles, but side hobbies to dive into, I couldn't sustain doing it even though I knew it might be a good route to go to build into a business. As soon as I felt like I just don't really enjoy doing this, I'm doing this for the wrong reasons, then it's not sustainable. Like it's not actually going to get me to where I want to go. Versus for me, doing a podcast like this, I love talking to people. I love getting to know people and dive into their stories and learn from them. And doing it on a public forum doesn't bother me. It doesn't make me anxious. And so like this is a great route for me to go and dive into. And so when I'm going through these checklists of things that I want to do, how I want to spend my time every single day, I'm always filtering through, do I actually enjoy what I'm doing here? Because that's the only way it's going to be sustainable for a long enough term to actually see some results. So as you're going through this thought process and you're about to start transitioning, you mentioned having this list of things that it had to check off in order for you to be able to say, I'm confident enough, excited enough about this. I believe that I can really do this long term, or at least long enough term to see some good results. What was on that list outside of just in being excited or enjoying the job?
Sure. Number one was helping people or feeling some sort of fulfillment. I had zero fulfillment at that payroll job. It just wasn't something that I felt like I was doing something very important. So it had to be rewarding and fulfilling to me. That was absolutely number one, even above, money, which obviously is on the list, but it wasn't top of the list. I had to feel, for the same reasons you're just saying, I have to like it. I have to, be excited about it. And that is something that was top of the list. I come from a law enforcement family, military family. And to me, I'm so not envious, but I respect those people so much that I felt like I wanted to do something that made a difference. Rather than just making a living, I wanted to make a difference. And so that was the top of the list for me. Other things was, like I mentioned, my wife was pregnant. Our son was due in May. And this was probably November, December that I started looking. And, I knew that I wanted to be around more. And the hours that were expected of me would not make me available to my wife and son. So I would prefer or was looking for something that I could possibly run from home. And so, running it from home, or at least have some sort of owning your own business, you're working around the clock. It's like another child. People say that. It's true. But I just wanted to have at least a little bit of flexibility where I could be around to help my wife. I'm not living near my family anymore. Her family is in the area, but they're all full-time. So we don't have a lot of help, or didn't at the time. And
this is 5 years
I knew
ago,
I wanted to be
pre-COVID.
around more.
This is pre-COVID, before it was
2018.
normal. Yeah, so before it was normal to work from home. And during this time, it was right before I started working for this payroll company that I had mentioned. And I was similar to how your old bosses were, where like I believed in in-person selling. I thought that was the best way to do things. I loved in-person interaction. That was a part of it as well. I never wanted to go and like the idea of sitting behind a desk and like doing things behind a computer. The thought of it drove me crazy until I got to the point where I was forced to do it. And I realized, oh my God, I could be so efficient, get so much time back in my day because I'm not driving from meeting to meeting. And if I need to do laundry in the middle of the day, or I'm raising a puppy that needs to go out every hour and a half, I don't have to schedule my day around that. I can just do it while I'm also working, right? Or take a 3-hour lunch if it fits in my schedule, and then work 3 hours later in the day because my girlfriend's working in the evening, and it's all good. So the flexibility like blew my mind when I got to experience it. But you like made it happen. You're like, I know this is going to be the case. I know that I can do this. And you just want to have the ability to work it around, do work around your life versus your life around your work.
That's exactly right. So that again, number two on the list. You know, like I mentioned, that last company, old fashioned views, old fashioned model. You know, working from home wasn't an option ever. I kept in touch with people. I mean, you know, it's just, that's their way to do it. It's always worked for them. So, you know, when it did come to COVID lockdowns, they worked at the office until the day they were forced to, and then reopened the day they were allowed to. So it just, you know, I knew that just, it's fine. I mean, that's some people, it works. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing. And then obviously, you know, it has to be sustainable. I have a house that I own. I have a wife. I have a child on the way. So I do have a lot of responsibility. So it needed to be something that earned enough, because my job was cushy. I mean, it paid well, and so I was giving that up. So I needed to be able to, and that's why I was looking for an existing business with existing cash flow, because I didn't want to start something from scratch and have that long ramp up period and the question of, is this going to work? So I was looking for an existing business. It's not the route I went, but that's how much conviction I had about this business that I started it, rather than buying something that existed already, because I just didn't find anything that hit the checklist.
So, like, thinking about, because I've thought about franchises a lot, and it sounds almost too good to be true, almost easy, which is laughable when you actually go through and do it, right? But easier than I've got this new idea and I want to start this company from scratch that's never, maybe it's an industry that's never really been tapped into before, or you don't know a ton about. Like, there's a big long tail ramp up. But for a franchise, you typically have to have a pretty decent sum of capital up front, right? And so it's, for a lot of people, they think, okay, this sounds really great. You know, maybe there's a type of franchise that they've heard about or they know people about they can learn from, and they want to take the plunge, but they might not have enough capital up front to really be able to get started. What was your situation around that? How did you go about thinking about it strategically? Because obviously with a new kid, there's a lot of expenses that you have to plan for, and anything else going on in your life, right? So what was your thought process around, hey, is this worth, like, I'm confident in myself, my ability to run this business, to franchise. So there are some things that are still laid out to kind of help get you started while you figure the rest out and make it your own. What is your process for thinking through that? How should other people be thinking through that for themselves?
Yeah. So when people hear franchise, a lot of times their head goes McDonald's. And you do need, on top of the massive buy price, just to use their logo, you need over $1 million in liquid assets. So obviously that wasn't an option. But, you know, this is a home service business, and the startup costs, you know, at this point, I didn't have a huge like savings account or anything, but, you know, throughout the years of working, I put some money into, you know, retirement plans, 401ks, whatever my employers previously offered. And so I kind of, so for me, I still didn't have enough to flat out buy it, even if I took that money out. So what's great to me about this franchise specifically was that it, you know, they coached me through everything. I mean, they were like, listen, do you need funding? Here's the best option. And that was an SBA loan. You know, you could get an SBA express loan. At the time, I think the max on the express loan was $150,000. And the express part is just that it gets processed faster. So it's still going through a bank, but it's backed by the government. So banks are a little bit more comfortable giving out these loans because I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert there, but I believe the government backs it. So, and they, you know, the corporate franchise, the franchisor, they let me talk to someone who had helped other offices out. That person put me in touch with the bank that loaned for several offices. So they knew that it had great potential to do well. The franchise was not around a long time before I bought in, maybe 4 or 5 years, I think. So it's not like it has decades of data and sample size to know that this is a sustainable industry. No question. It's not a household name, which is a good thing, because if you don't even know this industry exists, that means you never had to go through anything. But to me, the SBA loan process was the only way, and it worked out great. I went for the full 150. I had to, put up whatever I had at the time to get that loan, but that worked out very much. And of that 150, I only needed about, not only, but I needed about 80 to 90 was the startup cost for franchise fee, for equipment, for a truck, for all of that. And then the extra to me was, if I don't make a cent for the first 6 months, at least I have money, because they're not micromanaging of what you're spending your money on. You can use that loan for mortgage, for food. So I've never once been asked. There's just a few requirements of like insurances that, you're required to get business insurance and business personal property insurance. That's the only requirements. They haven't checked in once. It's paid off at this point, but they didn't check in once to make sure I was spending it the way they thought was fit. So that to me was the best option, and I highly recommend it if that's something you're thinking about. Plus, I think it's a higher amount you can get now on the Express, and it's easier to get because I think they want to promote small businesses.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's talk about your small business. Tell me about, you were going through this process of figuring out, I want this to check X, Y, and Z boxes. When you found that place, tell me about where you landed, and kind of what happened there at the start.
Sure. So like I mentioned, I was looking for an existing business, a lot of listings, home health care, that send aids to you. That was the only other one that I came close to. And then I saw a very vague posting on one of the websites that lists businesses, and it said helping trauma victims. And I was like, helping people. Number one, let me check it out. I ended up talking to a franchise broker, didn't know it was a franchise at the time. She said, listen, it takes a specific type of person. You got to be able to handle some sites and some things. So, she was walking me through it, and she said, listen, I represent many franchises. This is the only one that I own myself, my husband and I. And I was like, oh, well, if you know all these franchises and you bought it yourself, it must mean that it's good, right? So then after talking to her, she's like, you're definitely a candidate. She put me in touch with the CEO at the time. What it was, it's a crime scene cleanup company. And that's kind of specific. It's more of a biohazard remediation company. So that specifically does crime scenes, the aftermath of a suicide or an undiscovered death, hoarders, and then stuff like mouse droppings, cat urine odor removal, anything that comes out of a living thing. So not hazardous material, oil spills. We don't mess around with that, but anything that comes out of a living organism that could be potentially harmful or hazardous, we remediate. So that's what it is. I talked to the CEO, and, you run it from home. It's high margins. It's low overhead. It just seemed it hit all the check marks. And that's why I abandoned the existing business part of it and really was like, this sounds perfect. Even though that sounds weird because it's a hard thing to do when you realize the gravity of what you're doing. But it's something that once I saw that and realized what my day-to-day would be and the people that I'd be interacting with, everything else I looked at afterwards was colorless. It was gray. I couldn't find anything that excited me or interested me more than this. Every time I was like, all right, I don't want to just jump at the first thing that sounds exciting. This is a huge decision that could have ramifications for my family, my home, everything. Let me not just jump in because I'm excited. And so I kept looking, and I just couldn't focus on anything else. I just kept coming back to it. Everything else just seemed boring. So I just kept in touch, and then talking again. It's a necessary service. So to me, the sale part of it is not. I'm not selling the end client. I'm talking. I get to network with people who refer or who are a part of this. So it felt like a community almost that everyone involved just comes together to help people, and it just felt right, and that's kind of how I landed on it. It hit all the checkpoints, and it seemed like a perfect fit. Coming from that law enforcement family, I didn't do that. I went to business school instead. So to me, it was like merging the two.
What was that conversation like with your significant other going through, hey, the first conversation I'm interested in is I want to leave my cushy, safe job and go into business full time. Like, was that a conversation you had previously and she kind of knew it was your ambition, or is this like throwing something at her and she's like, wait, we got a kid coming? Because I can imagine that can be a tough conversation for a lot of people. And then after that, when you told her what you couldn't get off your mind, this is what I want to do, this is kind of the gist of what it's going to entail. Like, what were those two conversations like?
She knew I was not happy with my current situation. A couple years prior, she found herself, she was in corporate America marketing at a big tech firm, and it just wasn't for her either. I just think that we are people that value our time. We don't like people telling us what we're worth in these yearly evaluations. So, she was very unhappy, and I was like, you know what? Leave your job. We can survive on my salary. She had ambition. She wasn't just going to sit. She had ambition. She wanted to be a fitness teacher, which she became. She wanted to be she did odds and ends, substitute teaching, which she is great at because she's very maternal and caring and a compassionate person. So she's very into fitness. So she became an instructor. So she did all these odds and ends, and she's a great baker. So she did that as well. So because I think her being in that spot a couple years prior and leaving, she could see it. I was just, not very pleasant to be around. I 8+ hours of my day, I was not happy. And then I'd come home, and it's hard to be, Susie Sunshine when you've been in a dark dungeon all day. It's just like, it impacted my mood. So she could see that. So the conversation of I want to leave was very simple. She was completely on board, and I was like, I think I should do this. And I had someone I worked with previously, her husband was in a sales role and didn't get his promotion. So he was like, you know what? I'm doing my own thing now. Quit and started business. He bought an existing business, and I never talked to him in my life. I reached out to my previous coworker, and I was like, your husband did this. Can I talk to him? And she was like, yeah. And I talked to him, and he's such a good friend these days. He mentored me through the process, where to look, how to look at financial records. When I did inquire about a few businesses, they'll send you the last 3, 4, 5 years of financials. What are their revenue, gross, net, all of that. And he kind of coached me through that.
How critical was that relationship?
Pivotal. Every person that I'll mention is pivotal. Even the executive who I disagreed with at my last job, pivotal in my life. As much as I don't want to give credit, I have to, because I would probably still be there because I had friends at that job, but it's not enough. So, that conversation went easy of that I need to leave. Then it was, hey, I'm working with this guy who's helping me look at stuff. So there was a build. The conversation about, hey, I saw this interesting thing on interesting listing, and then go through it, just like any emotion, any range of emotion someone would have when learning about it. She was like, are you crazy? Can you handle this? She's known me my whole life. I've used residential power tools, a drill, and this requires cutting up floors, cutting out walls. Like there's some heavy duty stuff here. And she's like, I can't watch needles go into my arm when I get blood drawn. It's not the blood, but it's the needle go. So like, she's like, are you sure you can handle it? And you know what, to be honest, I didn't know. It's hard to know unless you've experienced something like it. How do you? So, which we can get into of how I didn't know, because I maybe did some unconventional things to find that out. But I was just like, I think I could, because I think that I'd have to. And, for what the reward was, and the reward I don't mean as money, the reward of helping people, being around more, and starting my own thing, and it being a necessary service, recession resistant, right? Because it's when something traumatic happens and someone needs that type of cleanup, it doesn't matter what the economical state of the world is, it needs to be done. And it shouldn't be done by a loved one.
Right.
Because that just makes it worse. So, to me, I was like, it'll work. I know I'll handle it, because I know that this person will need me. And when they do, I can rise to the occasion, because I can do it, and they shouldn't. So it was just kind of like that thought process. And she could just see it. I mean, she was the biggest supporter of mine and still is. And she could just see it the way that I was talking about it, and how I kept looking, because I am impulsive, but she saw that I kept looking, and I just kept coming back to it. So, it wasn't as resistant as I thought it would be. But there's still the wide-eyed reaction that I get from anyone when they find out.
Something that I run into a lot personally, and I know a lot of people who have as well, is your point about being impulsive. And I say it in the sense of, like, I have ADHD. I very much can get distracted or hyper-focused on something that isn't, like, what I should be focused on right now, right? And I make decisions very quickly, because I believe in failing fast. And I have no problem making dramatic life changes within 45 minutes of contemplating something, because in my head, like, I can do all of the thinking necessary in 45 minutes without overthinking it, because after I overthink it, then I get myself talked out of it. So how do you balance that ability to, like, make impulsive decisions? And sometimes, like, impulsive isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think there's a bad negative connotation around it, but understand, okay, this is not an impulsive decision. This is, like, even though I might have made it faster, like, I saw it, I did a little bit of due diligence, I like this a lot, and I did go a step further and keep looking, but I can't stop thinking about this. A part of me still can feel like that I might have just hooked onto that and never really given these other things a chance. So how do you think through that and, like, justify or, like, be honest with yourself about it?
I also have ADHD. I'm a recent diagnosis, so Adderall helps, but that's a very recent. That wasn't known at the time. So to me, I am the person that jumps from hobby to hobby. I give it my all, and then if I find something new, I would move on to it. And when it came to this, it just felt different. I don't know. I wish I can give you a more concrete evidence of how I knew, but I just knew because, again, the people I get to work alongside, law enforcement and coroners and people that I feel do such respectful work, that help, and that was interesting to me. It just, every aspect of it, again, it hit all the checkpoints. To me, that was the ultimate decision. There was nothing else that even came close to getting my checkpoints, and I thought they were lofty requirements. Work from home and make good money and, help people.
Yeah.
It seemed like I was aiming for the moon, which I was, and I figured if I could even come close, it'll be the step that I needed, and maybe not the next one will be perfect, but maybe the one after that. But at least I needed to break free. To me, it was always looked at as a stepping stone to get me out of the cubicle and into another position where I don't have to go to an office, or not even go to an office, just, like you said, sit and stare and all that. It was a stepping stone. So to me, I'm like, all right, if it just gets me one step closer. So when I found it and it hit all the checkpoints, it was like, it was the unicorn.
Yeah.
Even though, it was something that I had never even known existed. And I wasn't, very experienced with power tools or, the stuff that I have to see. It just hit all the check marks. I won't lie. One of the things that did very much interest me, and my wife knew this, and when I brought that point up, she was like, okay, you know what? That makes sense. I've always been a flipper. That's why I actually found Gary V, and you'll see the V Friend stuff. I found him because of garage selling. That's what I always did as a kid. I remember getting candy from my mom from Price Club and reselling it at school. So it's always been in me. And the hoarding aspect of this business where, I get to help clear out people, just like the show Hoarders. I go into people's homes, evaluate the way they're living, and help them sort the stuff they really need versus what's disposable, and then what can be donated. And, a lot of times they're just like, just get rid of it all, or it's the result of someone passing away and, someone inheriting this house that is disheveled. So getting access to that type of stuff and, with permission, being able to take some of that stuff that they were going to put into a landfill and being able to resell it and having some sort of system to, either donate it or resell it, it still had life. That is something that I can't explain why I've always liked doing that. It's probably just the thrill of the hunt. I was a, fan of pirates and going treasure hunting and all that stuff. It always excited me. And, I'd watch these shows where, the storage lockers or American Pickers, whatever, where they just are like, I can't believe I found this. No one's been in this room for 20 years and look what's here. That's always excited me, and that was now a real possibility, and I've always talked about that since our relationship, so that was a real possibility here. So it added a checkbox I didn't even know existed. So to me, it was everything I was looking for, plus had this level of something that in my free time I did as a hobby that I chose to spend my time doing on Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings.
That's the jackpot.
That's it. That was it, man.
That's it. One of my favorite things to hear people talk about is when I was a kid, I used to get like big bags of candy and resell it at school. Mm-hmm. It's a memory that I have that I did, and I always forget about it. In high school, I used to buy the 3.75 pound bags of Jolly Ranchers, and I would sell. It was like a quarter a piece, or $5 for $1, right? And so everybody just did $5 for $1, and
right.
I mean, you make 8 sales and it pays the bag off. And
man.
And then but I didn't go above and beyond and make a bunch of money for it. I would just eat the rest. Like they would just pay for the bags for me. Is usually how it would work. But either way, I'm like, I just got free product, right? But it's so funny because I thought I was so weird when I did that when I was younger, but I actually meet a lot of people that did similar things. That's awesome.
For me, it was Airheads. That was me. Airheads was my thing. So, and it was the same price point.
Yeah.
Quarter each, $5 for $1. That's hilarious. Yeah. And you know what? If you sell it one more, instead of beyond breaking even, you got paid to eat those Jolly Ranchers.
Damn straight. And usually I would stop at break even and then it would just kind of happen, right? People would find out like, oh, you're the plug.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So a lot of my hobbies in personal life, are based around that. I mean, I collected and flipped comics for a long time, and eventually the hobby pays for itself if you do it correctly. So, so that obviously, like I mentioned, that was a checkbox I never knew existed, and I thought that was always going to be just a hobby. But again, it was the bottom of the list.
Yeah. What are some of the main things that, now 5 years down the line, you've been in this business, you've gone through, I'm sure, plenty of ups, downs, lefts and rights. What are some of the biggest things that you've learned, whether it was when you were just getting started and trying to figure this whole thing out, because it's the first business that you've operated that was completely on you, or it's things that you might have failed at that you had to learn from that were really important, applicable to other things in life? Like, tell me a little bit about what comes to mind when you think of some of the biggest or hardest lessons that you've learned over the last 5 years.
Yeah. So, this is the 5th year. Like you mentioned, I launched in 2018. So this upcoming August will be full 5 years. What took me a few months after launch I was in this mindset that a lot of people start off and they have either a partner or they have a crew in mind or something. I was like, I'm going to do it myself. As long as I physically can, I'm going to do everything because I don't want to pay someone. I want to keep it all, right? And I did everything myself for a couple months, and that's all I could last. And then my body was hurting and everything. And, it's a lot. You wear a lot of hats when you're a business owner, even as a franchisee with the help of corporate, you still wear a lot of hats. And so I brought someone on. He was a previous coworker who was looking for just something in between jobs as well. And the very first job where I was like, okay, if we're making X amount of dollars this job, and I'm splitting it with him in that he's getting an hourly rate, so I'm still making the heavy majority, but my workload went 50%. He was, where I still kept a majority of the money, right? Because there's stuff like royalties and all the equipment and all that. So I was like, wait, I cut my work in half but I'm only spending on him way less than that. So it just, to me, like, that was a lesson that, when you find someone that at least that works well, do what you can, like, treat them well. I have had terrible bosses. I've had wonderful bosses, and I knew which one I wanted to be. So throughout the journey, I don't care about background, what you've been through, to an extent, but if you have similar values to me and what my goal is, and I always share it, even in the phone interview process, and if you come and work and we work well together, you'll get treated really well and paid really well and have opportunities. And, that a lesson to me was, employees, I've heard it before, but it's so true. You work for them rather than them working for you. Because when I'm on a job now and the crew is there, I'm like, what can I do to support you? I make runs to the truck to get equipment. You guys keep doing your thing. You do this. I'm going to go do an estimate because I want to keep you guys working. I really try to deliver for them. So that was, my employees, I value so much. So I try to treat so well, as much as I can. And a lesson I've learned is that basically I work for them instead of they working for me, because I want them to stay around. I want them to thrive. I want them to grow. Cause if money's coming in, I want to distribute it out to the people who have helped me. So that's one of the lessons I learned. Hardships as far as that. I mean, it's tough. This business is not all great. I've had vacations ruined. Now that's industry specific, but you get that call, you cancel your plans for the weekend, for the night, whatever it is. So that's always tough. And I've gotten calls in the middle of the night. Again, that's industry specific. But I have made the mistakes of, not thinking I was valuing an employee when they didn't feel that way. And it grew, and then it exploded. And, I had a bad experience. One comes to mind specifically, and I didn't know. So now it's always like, I try to keep it completely open. Like, if there's an issue, you have to tell me, because I don't want to find out 3 months from now that you've been miserable and now you're looking for a job. And then, yes, I get stuck, but I don't want anyone to live in that environment, because that's what I lived through. So that was something that I had to learn while operating. And
how do you create an environment like that, though? Because I feel like that's something that's easier said than done. And a lot of times people that you're hiring or working for you might have had experiences where the words were in line in their previous roles with that, but they knew that the second something came out of their mouth that was negative, that they would get scolded for it or punished in some way, shape, or form. Right? So people have scars from previous roles and bad leadership in the past. So how do you genuinely create that environment of them feeling comfortable to talk to you, even if it's something that, hey, I messed up, it's really bad, but I'm feeling this way recently, here's why, really get into the roots. How do you create that environment as a business owner?
Yeah, it's hard because you want to, you might like some of these people as a friend, like the way you hang out with your friends and talk to them, but there's a line to cross where it's too friendly instead of like where the roles are, you know, kind of misunderstood at some point where they're like, you know, no, Tom's my friend. And it's like, yes, you know, we are friends. So to me, the best way that I found it is by talking to them. You know, I will take them to lunch on a day where we don't have work and there's no jobs to be done, which is often. I'll take them to lunch and I'll pay and I'll be like, what are your goals? Because I was never asked at any job I was at, aside from what is my goal at this company. I was like, what are your goals in life? You know, try to get to know them. I mean, one of the things my employee once mentioned that his dream was to fly an airplane. Well, come, you know, we have a great month. He got flight lessons. So stuff like that, I just think that really helps get you there is by listening. Just genuinely caring. I don't know. You know, it just, what happened, why that other one grew is that it wasn't that I did something that he didn't feel comfortable. He thought he was disappointing me, and that's why he didn't want to tell me. And then it grew, but then it grew into like animosity. And so if I'm on a job, and I'm like, hey, can you go do this? And he's like, you know, rolls his eyes. And I'm like, what's going on, man? And then he's like, and then it kind of grew from there. So I crossed the line of being too over accommodating. You know, hey, you know, can you work today? No, like, hey, we have a job today. Not, can you work today? You know, I got a little uncomfortable because I was new to this world. I had never, aside from my employees at work when I was a manager, which still it's like, it was never demanding. It was like, here's what we're doing today. Let's go and do it. So unless they weren't doing the set guidelines, that I never really had to tell them to do anything. They knew. So for this person, I feel like I was still kind of learning how to go from I'm your employer to I'm your friend. And I kind of took it too far. And I asked him then, you know, when he would say, I'm like, hey, I got this call. We got to go job. And he's like, I can't today. And I'm like, what? You know, it was like, he became too comfortable. And it just caused a problem down the line. So there is a threshold. So it needs to be, there is a line. But I've learned where that line is from going to one way where I was only boss, you know, to the other way where I was over accommodating. So that learning curve has led to me learning, right? You either win or you learn. I don't know. That's a quote. So that kind of was something that I had to learn on the job.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of people right now, especially in tech, that are going through some hardships. You know, like the economy, like obviously there's some businesses that are not in alignment with what's going on in the economy. A lot are, especially in tech. We've seen some horrible, massive layoffs. A lot of people are looking for jobs. A lot of people are trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. They were kind of forced into this, okay, now I'm not in my 9 to 5. And some of them are thinking, do I want to go back? Do I want to go back to a place that, you know, doesn't value me? I'm just another number to them. Like maybe I get paid really well at these big tech companies, but I'm not happy. You know, I've thought about starting my own business. Maybe I want to still be an employee, but I want to feel valued. I want to have the flexibility that I didn't have at my previous role. What's some advice you'd leave them with of, you know, they're sitting here at home, they're trying to figure out what they want to do next, whether it's start their own company, start a franchise, go into, like, look for a better employer. What are some of the things that they should be going through in their head and really assessing before making that move or that jump for what's next?
I think that in that situation, it's really tough. I think that if you're working in tech, you have a very valuable skill, one that I don't have, that I wish I did. I don't have it. So I think you have a very valuable skill, and there is opportunities. Obviously, Web3 has been huge in the last couple of years, and there's a lot of opportunity now in there, but it does require independent work, and it's hard because you don't know what you don't know. And I think that for me, how I got there was I looked for I made the checklist. The checklist was what I lived by when I was making decisions. What do I want? And I know that's easier said than done, but it did guide me. And it emerged what I wanted and what I liked. So if you're in tech and you don't like tech, don't be in tech. If you went into tech because you thought I can make a lot of money because that's where the world is turning, you're not wrong, but is that sustainable long term if you don't really like it? So I wouldn't recommend doing something that you don't particularly like and trying to start your own business. Highly don't recommend. Taking another job in it, while at the same time exploring what feels right to me is the move. There's always going to be tech jobs. Tech is not going anywhere. It's going to ever evolve. And, even if you don't like it, keep learning, obviously, because you're going to have to keep up. And it's generalized term. I'm not a tech person, so I can't get real technical in it. But as far as where you want to go, you need to make an income. So I don't fault them for keep looking for a job, but you really got to find what you like. If you don't like it, don't start a business in that industry. Unless it merges something like Web3 opened up doors. I was never a tech person. As much as I like to buy and sell stuff, stocks wasn't my thing. It's too complicated to me. My brain does not understand it enough. And there's just it's so overwhelming. But when I got into NFT, Web3, VFriend, it made more sense. Even crypto, I can't get involved. But NFTs made more sense because it was buying and selling collectible stuff. So that was my entry point into learning more about it. I'm by no means an NFT expert. I don't know all the projects or anything, but it got me into it, and at least I feel comfortable in the space that I'm at, and I try to just keep expanding the comfort zone. I don't mind living in it, but it has to keep growing. Again, I'm going to just echo it again. I would not start a business in tech if you don't like it. If that is your passion, I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space. I don't know it because I don't know tech that well, but I know that Web3 is opening a lot of doors, and especially with the NFT marketplace and moving forward, there's a lot of independent stuff that you can do and build. It's more with Discord and all the avenues. I think that it's an avenue to look into. But if you don't like it, don't do it.
Love it. Tom, this has been awesome. Where can people find you?
Tjer, at Tjer _01 on Twitter. The gold compassionate catfish. That's the iconic of it. That's the logo on Discord. Same name. That's where I'm at the most. I like Twitter the most, so I'm on there, and I'm on Discord a lot. So that's where you can find me. And this was a blast, man. I really enjoyed it. And, the thing that I mentioned about that coworker's husband who guided me to getting to where I am, I want to be that person to anyone. That's the next chapter for me. I'm still doing what I'm doing, and I really enjoy it. But that's what drives me and why on my Twitter there is a pinned tweet of my story a little bit more in depth. I'm an open book. Anyone who comments or responds, I respond to them and say, tell me about it. I'm interested. Let's DM. So it's happened. I want to be that person and guide as much as I can. I don't know everything, but I will share my experience, and that's what I'm looking to do moving forward.
Love that. Thank you, Tom. This has been so fun. I know that you are exploring potentially getting a podcast of your own, trying to get more of your voice and your face out there, try and scale your knowledge and ability to help others. So anyone who's listening to this that has questions, wants to ping Tom, you heard him. He's wide open to it. And definitely keep an eye out for what he's working on next. Tom, it's been awesome.
Thanks, man. This was a blast.
Awesome.